Hello everyone, welcome to Versus MTG. Today we are playing Dredge in Modern and we're going to start with a quick deck tech. If you have already seen this, you can skip it and go directly to the gameplay. Dredge in Modern is about filling our graveyard as quick as possible using the Dredge mechanic. We have in our deck a bunch of creatures and spells that are better in our graveyard or being put in our graveyard from the library than in our hand. But what is exactly the Dredge mechanic? It says the following. If you would draw a card instead, you might put exactly X cards from the top of your library in your graveyard. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand, otherwise draw a card. So basically you get to choose the card you want to draw by milling cards. The cards in this deck have basically 4 functions. First are cards that let us start the engine. These are Trinkhorn that let us meet 2 cards for each of 3 counters in it, Cathartic Reunion that let us put 2 cards from our hand into the graveyard and then draw 3 cards, and Merchant of the Valley that let us discard 1 card at instant speed, then draw a card. These cards are in charge of putting the dredgers in our graveyard, so we play 11 of these. Then we have the dredgers. Life from the Loom that can dredge for 3 and get us 3 lands from the graveyard, Extinct Imp that can dredge for 5 and also has flying and pseudo death touch that can be very important. Golgari Thug that can dredge for 4 and let us put 1 creature from our graveyard on top of our library. This can also be very important. What we want in our opening hand is at least 1 of each of the cards in these 2 groups. So we now have a way of putting lots of things in our graveyard, but besides dredgers we need something to actually kill our opponent. That comes in the form of Prize Amalgam that come back every time a creature has entered the battlefield from our graveyard. Also Agonas is a 4/2 that it only costs 2 red to cast when it is in our graveyard. Get a +1/+1 counter when it does, and also let us discard our hand and draw 3 cards. This card does everything. Let us discard things that we want in our graveyard, then we get to dredge a bunch, and also we trigger amalgams, so it also gets back from the graveyard. And finally, Silver Smooth Ghoul that comes back every time we gain at least 3 life during the turn. And the third component are the enablers, that are the cards that trigger the ability to come back of our amalgams and Silver Smooth. We have here Narcomoeba that comes back when it is put in our graveyard from our library, triggering the amalgam ability. Also we have Creeping Chill that when it is put in our graveyard from our library we gain 3 lives and opponent loses 3 life, triggering the Silver Smooth that then triggers the amalgam. And finally 1 copy of Smiling Helix that does 3 damage to any target and we gain 3 life, doing a similar thing that Creeping Chill, with the difference that we have to pay 2, a red and a white, if it is in our graveyard to cast it at sorcery speed. It can help us deal with some planeswalker or creature that we don't want on the battlefield. And finally, we have 1 multi-purpose card in the form of Conflagrate. This card can have 3 functions in the deck. The first is to clear the path for our creatures to attack. The second is to kill a specific creature that can enable a combo or maybe kill us. And finally, to finish off our opponent. Now to the sideboard. Dredge is an interesting deck in terms of sideboarding, because most decks bring things that make them better against the other deck. No, we don't really want to do that. Our sideboard plan is mainly to fight the sideboard of our opponent. Here are some of the cards that we need to keep in mind while sideboarding with Dredge. Most of them will come as an artifact or enchantment, but of course are other things like Ashiok and Anger of the Gods that can be really difficult to fight against. During game 2 and 3, Dredge also needs to play a bit differently, because you need a way to rebuild your graveyard and in case that they'll exile it. So, for artifacts and enchantments, we bring Wear and Tear, Ancient Grunge, Stunning Silence, and Shenanigans to fight, of course, all of this. For creature decks, we have one copy of Dark Blast that can dredge for 3 and kill small creatures or help us get one more extra damage to kill a bigger one. Another conflagrate that can help us clean the board. And finally, 3 Lightning Axes if we are playing against bigger creatures like Tarmogoyf. Usually, you can exchange one Golgari Thug for a Dark Blast or bring in Lightning Axe for Merchant of the Valley. And finally, we have one copy of Ghost Quarter against Throne and Lands Matter deck, Alien of the Vault for the Mirror, and Inquisition of Kozilek that can help us avoid another Inquisition or Thoughtseize. We really want to protect here our Reunion and our Merchant of the Valley. And that's Dredge. Now, let's see how it plays out.